Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for me, it's a great pleasure to be here again. About a year ago, I was here for the same purpose that we are here today. And I remember when we were here last year, there were some people around. I think, what do they call them? Sit, occupy. And we were not even sure whether we would be allowed to enter or they will occupy the place before we enter. Today, they are not occupying. We are occupying. This is a city, of course, that has its own dynamism, its own character, but more importantly, its own beauty and its own challenges. And because of the vision, the talent, the hard work, and the capital put together, this city has shown extraordinary result and extraordinary success and reward. Africa today is in the same sort of mood and spirit. Mood to move forward, mood to make progress, and spirit of showing extraordinary results. Ambassador, I want to thank you because you have put it as it is, what progress we are making. But I want you to convey to the Secretary General, on behalf of all of us in Africa, that the United Nations is looking at Africa in a different way. Your office, 10 years ago, would concern itself only with the issue of peace and conflict resolution. If at all, a little bit on the human or humanitarian aspect. Today, we are partners. The United Nations, the AU, the regional economic communities, and the African organizations and institutions. We are together talking about the issue of economic progress, the issue of investment, the issue of how to make Africa not only just a continent of the future, but a continent of the present. So we have good news coming out of Africa. As you rightly said, no longer a basket case. Talk about the 7 fastest, or out of 10 fastest growing countries in the world, 7 are Africa. But what is particularly heartening about this is that they are not fastest growing because of oil and mining alone. They are fastest growing when you take a country like Ethiopia or a country like Rwanda, who have no oil to talk about, at least not yet, or great mining to talk about. And yet, Ethiopia average growth is 8.4%, and Rwanda 7.6%. These are good news. What has made this possible? I think a number of things happened at the beginning of this millennium, or if you like, at the end of the last millennium. We have the MDG, which was initiated by the United Nations. We had OAU transforming into AU on a different constitutive act or charter, if you like. We have NEPAD, which was AU program for development, agreed by all members, the sort of thing we've never heard. We had APRM, peer review mechanism, where African leaders could look at each other in the face and say, you are doing this wrong. Why don't you look at doing this another way? And we have later on APP, Africa Progress Panel, in which I'm a member. All these come together to provide conducive atmosphere for what started to happen in Africa and what has happened for almost a decade. But that's not enough. As I said, it happens in agriculture. But what is happening in agriculture is really the tip of the wedge, because Africa is still the continent where 60% of arable land in the world is available, untouched, untapped. But in spite of all the progress that we are talking about, growth and results we are talking about, there are still challenges. And you have been kind enough to mention some of them. Challenge of infrastructure, particularly of power. Challenge of uncompleted reform in all aspects of our national life. Challenge of inadequate capital, and challenge of some malpractices that we can do without. Challenge in the disparity between rich and poor within our countries and between rich and poor countries still in Africa. We also have challenge which lack of integration imposes for us. Because we need to get to a point where investment in one country in Africa, if our economic integration is what it should be, where the investment in one country in Africa will have beneficial advantage throughout Africa. That is what integration, greater integration that I'm talking about, will be achieving. And these should not be difficult to get, because we already have 5 regional economic communities. And it's easier for each of these economic communities to come together. For instance, it's easier for East African community, Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, representing almost 150 million people to come together. And that will make a lot of difference if they are able to integrate. It will make a lot of difference in the issue of institutional investment and in all the aspects of economic growth and development and progress. It's also interesting to note the change, not only at the UN level, but at the international community level. The change in how Africa is perceived. Not too long ago, the Secretary of State in this country visited 9 countries in Africa. It was very interesting, the number of business people, including executives from Boeing, from Walmart, and General Electric, taken along with her on that visit to Africa. So we now, on the African side, and externally from outside Africa's side, we now appreciate foreign investors and African investors alike as having strong interest in a stable and prosperous and peaceful continent. In all the organizations that I have mentioned that have worked together or worked separately to bring about what we are having now, Africa Progress Panel, just like AU itself has got NEPAD at its program, Africa Progress Panel produces policy paper to help the investors in Africa, to give them a roadmap and pinpoint pitfalls and advice on what should be done, while at the same time advising the African governments and African leaders on what needs to be done to create the necessary conducive environment for investment in Africa. So, NEPAD, APRM emanating from it, is the most important of most of the homegrown initiatives that have boosted good governance and economic growth in Africa. And as of today, 33 countries have joined the African peer review mechanism. And about 15 countries have actually been peer reviewed. What are the key aspects of the policies, whether policies that emanate from NEPAD or from any of the other homegrown initiatives? As I said, one, African institutional investment community need to do what they need to do for Africa to continue to make progress. And who are these? And what should they be doing? Of course, they are domestic banks, insurance companies, mutual funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, endowment funds, and hedge funds. Both domestic and institutional investors and local private investors must dominate the investor base, with insurance companies and pension funds now coming up to play an increasingly important role. African capital markets seem to have been, taking the Nigerian example that I know very well, seem to have been hit when there was financial and economic crisis in 2008. the equity capital market went into doldrum, and debt capital market also went down. Although there are 29 stock exchanges out of 55 countries in Africa as of today, compared with 5 stock exchanges in 1989, most of these stock exchanges are weak. They are not as vibrant as they should be, and the financial market are illiquid. Private equity investment opportunities, of course, abound, but Africa is considered one of the last frontier for private equity. Africa provides opportunity driven by improving macroeconomic fundamentals, abundant natural resources with unparalleled opportunity to create new and improve existing businesses. I said earlier on that African pension funds are still in their very early stage. Apart from South Africa, Nigeria, and Botswana, most other countries, they are either very weak or non-existent at all. This means that in these areas in Africa, our leaders have to take necessary policy measures that will provide for mobilizing internal resources for investment. What I'm saying, in essence, is that the role of foreign investment is very, very important. And it is incumbent on our leaders to make sure that the necessary conducive conditions are provided for foreign investment to regard Africa as irresistible destination. It has been said that capital is cowardly. Cowardly in the sense that it will run away from where it is not invited. So it is up to us to invite capital so that it will not run away from us. I want to emphasize the areas of opportunity: power, infrastructure, agribusiness, manufacturing. There's no part of Africa where there are no crying needs for investment in these areas. But let me also emphasize the fact that the challenges, the constraints that we have, most African countries are already addressing them. And Africa can be regarded as investment ready, investment inviting. Let me appeal and stress the point that we must do everything possible to avoid the Arab Spring calamity being the lot of Africa. In all this, and Ahmed said the point yesterday we were together talking about the young Africans who pull themselves together and call themselves Africa 2.0. They are young, most of them under 45. They are bright, they are dynamic, they are angry, and they are committed. They want to have a change, and they believe that they don't have to look 20, 30 years away. They have chosen as their target date the year 2020. That's part of where they derive their name from, Africa 2.0. I see them and their effort as complementary to the effort of governments in bringing about NEPAD, in bringing about APRM, in bringing about even APP that I mentioned earlier on. But if all these do not work together to achieve providing job opportunities, employment opportunities for our teeming millions of our young people, then what Clifton, the chairman of Gallup, has predicted in his new book, The Coming Jobs War, will occur. That what is the fear of the world today, or what should be the preoccupation, is how to create enough jobs. Enough jobs in developed economies, enough jobs in developing economies, enough jobs in emerging economies, enough jobs in frontier economies, but enough jobs globally. And without this, the danger of war-based or instigated because of lack of jobs may be what the world should try to avoid. And it is not just a question of investment in one part of the world and not investing in another part. To avoid what we have called the coming jobs war, there must be all-round investment to create jobs, but particularly in areas of the world where the multiplier effect of creating more jobs will be felt globally than others. And Africa is that place where the multiplier effect will be felt more decisively than others. Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.